Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Service Catalog webinar this morning. My name is Laura Walker. I'm the Business Development Director for Stratacom. We're an IT consulting company. We have Greg Gerton, who will be speaking with you today. Greg is one of our senior Cherwell consultants. He's also been certified in other tools in the past, so he'll be walking through real-life lessons learned in putting together service catalogs and running service catalog projects. And towards the end of our presentation, he'll also be doing a demo of some of the tools he's familiar with to give you some hands-on takeaways. To kick things off, I wanted to give just a very brief introduction about our company to give you a little context. We were started in '97 as an ITSM consulting company. We've specialized in numerous tools over the years as tools have come and gone in popularity. We have offices located around the country. A lot of our offices are based in the middle of the country, but we do have offices on the coast as well. We are solely focused on IT service management, so this is what we do day in and day out for the last couple of decades. Our consultants, many of them have been with us for 10 years, some up to 30 years on staff, so we have very senior repertoire of consultants, including Greg, who's on the call today. Our consultants are versed in both process and technical, so questions you have on either side can be directed towards Greg. Next slide, please, Greg. Some of the services we offer in case we could be of service to you in the future. We do tool implementations across multiple platforms. We do process evaluation and consulting. We do a lot of integration and customization work on specific ITSM software tools. We also do a lot of managed services and staff augmentation. If those are ever of interest, please reach out to us anytime. Next slide. So I'm going to kick it off to Greg to what we're covering today, but a couple quick housekeeping items. We will be taking questions. Everyone is on mute mode since this is a webinar, so I would encourage you to use the questions pane to ask questions. We'll save most of the questions for the very end after the presentation has concluded, but especially as Greg's going through the demo, if you have questions of things you'd like to see as we're moving through or specific process questions, I can jump in with those as well. If you don't see that questions pane, look for a little orange box with a white arrow. If you click on that, that'll expand all your panes and you should see the place to enter questions there. With that, I think we should get right into our content, so I'm going to kick it off to Greg.
Thank you, Laura. So, as Laura said, my name's Greg. I will be presenting today, and today we're going to talk about Service Catalog, and we're going to really concentrate on the process behind getting your Service Catalog built or designing a Service Catalog, managing and maintaining as well. I will, on occasion, talk about some technical aspects to it or something that a technical person may be more interested in. That's probably just out of habit because of who I am. And then, as Laura had mentioned, currently I've been working primarily with Cherwell, so there are probably going to be times where I may mention something along those lines, but in general, these practices should be able to be applied to any tool. So we'll go over design concepts, recommendations, how to organize your information, how to utilize Service Catalog workflow. One that I think is really key that people sometimes overlook is how to present and market your Service Catalog to your internal users. And then some potential pitfalls maybe along the way, and I think we'll get into some of those probably in the question and answer period as well. So first, we're just going to start with some important terminology. Hopefully we all know if we're here, but what is an IT service? An IT service is considered one or more technical or professional IT capability that enables a business process. I think most of us here probably know that, but we're looking at something that's going to fulfill one or more need to your customer or supports the customer's business objectives. The next one I'm going to talk about, and I like to concentrate on this piece, and again, it's me trying to get back to that process side, which is service portfolio. So part of your Service Catalog, really your entire Service Catalog, because your Service Catalog is a piece of it, would be your service portfolio. And what I want to look at is the service pipeline, how you develop and determine what services are going to be put into that Service Catalog, and the process that you take to do that, managing that Service Catalog, which is your life cycle in that piece. And then when you decide to retire a service, and there should be some workflow tied to that, whether the service is not being used anymore or is now outdated. So how would you build your service portfolio? You don't want to start by building that service catalog. You want to determine what your customers want, and you want to determine how you can offer it to your customers. So if you look at portfolio development, I have a graph here that I think really walks through this process pretty well. You may not do all of these, but you probably have pieces of this already in place today. So the service pipeline is going to be your different statuses listed there, where you're going to go through requirements, determining when you're going to look at adding another service, and going through defining those services, analyzing them, getting them approved, a charter if possible, and then the design of the actual technical aspects to it, developing the service, building it and testing, and all those types of processes before you actually release that service into your service catalog. Then you're going to have your production service catalog, and that's going to be in released and operational status. You're probably going to have some maintenance that's going to have to be done over time to services. You're going to want to have a process in place for how that maintenance would be accomplished, and then the retirement of those services. So how do I come up with services? The best thing first is to define those service categories. And when I say service categories, I mean the big parent buckets. So when I work with a customer about building a service catalog, the first thing I usually try to do is keep the home page or the landing page very simple, with small or with big buckets and very little distractions. I don't want a bunch of links all over that home screen to go to different places. I want to drive your customer through different paths with big buckets. So often on a landing page, I would have report an incident, because you're always going to have that option where somebody's going to have something you're not going to have in your catalog. Then I would have a service catalog button, and then I probably would have a help button, or a knowledge articles, or a frequently asked questions, or something along those lines. You're probably going to have a few links to like statuses or status updates, and maybe like an alerts or a major incident type situation. But that is as limited as I would keep that, and I would try not to distract away with too many different pictures and things like that, just because often the people that are going to these pages aren't necessarily your technical users. So we want to try to keep it as simple and streamlined as possible to walk through it. So I mentioned one of the buttons being Service Catalog. I would hope that then, after opening that Service Catalog button, you would then have a subset of category buckets. So instead of displaying the entire Service Catalog to your users, I would like to show, whether it's 4, 6, 8, however many excuse me, categories you may have, show those categories. And then as you select that category, drill down into the next level. So this would help drive, I think, that workflow for your users, and I think it's a little bit easier to work with and look at. Once you get to those categories, you generally can identify a group or a business unit who's responsible for those categories, and that will help you to get requirements. So once you get to those business groups, you can say, okay, what things can we show on the catalog that are going to be beneficial to our users? And start driving down towards requirements that way. So if you're starting out with a new project, you can help define your requirements by going through the path. Defining those top level categories should be your first, or services should be your first step though. So rules for defining services. You want to make sure that those services are stated in business terms. So usually when I give a demo or a presentation, I talk about renaming your services on the portal versus what they are internally. So we may call something just a simple one, Outlook 2016, but on the end user side, we just want it to say email. So it's just a simple terminology change where we know internally as IT people what that means, but to the end user, maybe they should know, but they don't. So it's easier to just put it in the terms that your team or your business team will understand. You want to make sure that your portfolios group business services in like business services. So just make sure that everything is kind of in a good organized method. And you want to make sure that the services you provide, especially starting out with a new service catalog, can be measured and provide business value. So when I say that, I want to look at a service like email or something that's used very frequently and requested very frequently, so you can show the advantages of the service catalog. We want to show people why they should use it. So the advantage of the automation and the approvals and the tasks and the other things that you can tie to that service catalog item that are just going to improve your performance, your SLA, against those items. And obviously you want to review it and make sure that it makes logical sense. So a service example. This is just kind of to show an example. Technically, when we look at a service, email is something that we think of very simply because it's always there. Every company has one. But there are quite a few different pieces that could be tied to that, especially if you host it internally. The end user, though, all they care about is that icon. So it's important that to them that they get that icon. They don't care about the rest. So where I'm going with this is we want to take that complex solution and make it very simple. It can be complex to us. The workflow can be complex, but it's important that to the user and the person who's going through the service catalog that it's very simple. So what else do you need? We want to come up with support levels. So if a service has an issue once it's ordered or during the ordering process, we need to track those things. The managers who are responsible for the service, and then we want to keep track of those SLAs or the availability of the service, like I had mentioned earlier. Something that I haven't talked about as much recently because the newer, more modern tools kind of account for this out of box, but you want to make sure that you have two views. Excuse me. So what I mean by two views is the end user is going to go through your portal, your catalog, but your technical view, your internal staff will obviously be able to log in and manage that tool or go through that process internally in the admin tool. So that's kind of the start. That's the easy part. Now we have to actually look at the fulfillment of that service. So what we want to look at here, if people are using the catalog, we want to actually make sure that they get what they ordered or deliver what they ordered. So what does fulfillment look like to IT? So to us, here's a video diagram of a certain workflow process. So we're going to build this in for that service so we can have different expressions or tasks or approvals and processes based on selections through the catalog. So if I have a checkbox checked on my catalog item, I'm going to trigger a specific task. All of these things are designed into this Visio diagram or workflow. And you want to make sure that you have those Visio diagrams and workflow in place before you start building, because that's going to really help your technical team be able to build that workflow more efficiently.
Hey, Greg, I got a question that might make sense to interject here.
Yep.
The question is, are you not worried that the Submit Incident button would be used by default and the customer would never go to the catalog?
That is a great question. So I used to give a big spiel about the other option in a catalog or a category selection. I unfortunately feel that, and this is just through practice, that the Submit Incident button has to be available. And what I try to do is show the Submit Incident, and I've even done this with icons, if something's broken. So I've had like a hammer and other things where you've had like some sort of a broken type icon. And then for the service catalog, I would show something new, trying to request something new or try to go down a specific path. I just find through experience with users, if I go away from that incident button, it'll be the #1 complaint that you have is there's nowhere for me to just submit an incident. Now, another option that I've seen customers go with is having the service catalog and getting down to a specific area, but then always having that other option to say, I don't see what I'm looking for, and then submit an incident from that. And at least then you're driving them through the workflow. But it really is a great question because it's something you can debate with every customer based on their process and their team. But I do feel that more often than not, I have the justification for that submit incident button, and I need to have both the submit incident for a generic incident and then the service catalog on top of it. So hopefully I answered that question. Otherwise, please feel free to jump in on that again, and we can definitely cover more on that at the end as well. So.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so how are my fulfillment processes different once I implement a service catalog? And this one, I think, it kind of hits home sometimes when I go through this with a customer as we're starting to build in a service catalog, is we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. More often than not, you're already doing the process. We're just trying to help you automate something that you already do today. So, for example, believe it or not, there are people that carry forms from one desk to another to get signed. Instead of doing that, we want an electronic approval. There's still people that require forms to be filled out and submitted. Instead of doing that, we're creating those forms within the tool and then allowing those to be filled out and submitted for requests or approval, depending on how it goes. So what we should be doing is taking your existing process, unless you've determined that process is bad and needs to be reworked, and putting that process into a tool. So it shouldn't really be any different than what you do today. It's just going to be tweaked. So sometimes people, I think, get too worried about some of the things that may be changing if you sit down and you actually kind of look at it. You shouldn't be changing a whole lot. You're enhancing or streamlining the process, hopefully. Another key step is to make sure that you move to a single input tool. I cannot express how many times I have shown up to a customer and they have 3 or 4 different tools that they monitor for requests. I think it's important that your customers know there's one location to go to request something. So when they need something, they know that they can go directly to that tool and get the request or item that they need through that tool, so that it's a little bit easier for them to remember. It pushes them to use it. There are so many different reasons to do that. Typically, most of IT is already using your ITSM tool, and that's why I think it makes the most sense to use an ITSM tool like Cherwell in order to walk through your service catalog. So before publishing your service portfolio or catalog, you must map out that fulfillment process. So when I talked about those Visio diagrams, it's very important to have that fulfillment process in place. Some of your services may be very simple. They may be 2 or 3 Visio diagram boxes, and maybe it doesn't make sense to document those to a certain degree or a certain level, but you need to at least follow through that path, especially with onboarding or termination and things that can be multiple levels of approvals and 20, 25 tasks long, things like that. We definitely want to make sure we have a Visio diagram to go back to and document. Knowing that when tasks are going to be sequential versus parallel, being able to, no matter what tool you choose today, I believe with the modern tools, I think they all do now at this point, being able to trigger sequential versus parallel tasks, being able to have dependencies in place for once a task is completed, now trigger the other tasks. Those are all very key components to make sure that you have documented before starting the actual development of the tool. So an ideal solution for managing workflows allows your manager to manage a single ticket. What I mean by a single ticket is a single request ticket. So in Cherwell, we open up a incident or request, and that incident or request could have 2025 tasks and multiple approvals, whatever else, or other child tickets, even other incidents that could be managed for whatever reason, or other requests that could be managed. But there is child tickets related to that one parent ticket, and you want to make sure that you're managing one parent ticket per request. If possible, you want to track child tickets with SLAs. And this is where many customers will get hung up during their service catalog process. A task will get assigned to somebody but not get worked. If we don't have an SLA on that task where that person gets notified that something's been out there for a certain period of time, or getting tracked on a dashboard with a manager so they can go back and say, why is it taking us this long to get our AD accounts created so we can continue the rest of the process of the onboarding process. You want to be able to track those different SLAs or track those different tickets so that you can enforce and monitor and keep your process as quick as possible. Is that you, Laura?
What was that?
Oh, I thought I heard you unmute or something. Sorry.
Nope. Nope.
Never mind. Alerts, emails, and pages for those child tickets are also key components to consider and document in those Visio diagrams when you expect an alert or an email to go out. And we want the system that we're in to be able to send those alerts. There are some caveats to that. I definitely have seen other tools that are have emergency alerting systems or things like that that work really well too. So I don't want to push that one too hard, but it's nice from a simplistic standpoint, looking at it for most customers starting out. Excuse me, to keep that within the tool. So if you were to look at the email process, here's a quick Visio diagram of what that email workflow will look like. But you want to remember that complex workflow should be complex to us, not to your user. So going through your request piece, you want to make sure that that form where they go through and fill out the information is as simple as possible. We want key information that we're going to ask them. We're going to fill out that key information, and then we're going to automate as much as possible. So if we need a user ID, an Active Directory account, whatever that information is, we want to fill that out and then trigger the dependent tasks as needed based on that information. So it's automated. So as soon as we get that Active Directory account name, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to use that account to trigger another task that goes to the next step, and they already have the information they need instead of having to go back and talk to somebody and find out what it is. So keys to an effective workflow is to make sure you, the first one is obvious, you want to plan that workflow in advance, taking some time with your business managers, your SMEs, whoever else it may be, and sitting down and going through that process and planning it in advance. We don't want to publish a service catalog item out there just to get a service catalog item out there. If there's no benefit to it, people aren't going to see the use and want to keep using it. We want to get teams together to discuss that fulfillment process. So even though you may have a SME who says, this is what I have, it is beneficial sometimes to even go to the people who are implementing it and excuse me, and make sure that they've looked at the process and seen if there are any tweaks that could be made to streamline their workflow. Sometimes people just don't understand that there's one extra step that they were doing that takes them an extra 15, 20 minutes that we could have automated and we just didn't know. We want to track that fulfillment process and definitely have the reporting on that so that you can show people the improvement or the number of tickets that you guys are doing or how it's being used. There are so many advantages to being able to have that information. Automate everywhere possible. Keep the end user informed because if they don't know what's going on, they're going to try and call you and find out. So we want that end user to know we're working on this ticket. If it's going to take us 10 days to implement it and we don't tell them that, they're going to call probably after the second day and every day after that until they get what they're looking for. So we want to try and keep this so that we can get our process in place quick, but if we for some reason are not getting it in place quick, keeping them informed on the different steps. So your process is now in this stage, or your request is now being fulfilled, or whatever, again, status or different areas where you feel that information is important, we can notify them. One that I've found personally has worked very well for implementing a successful service catalog is making sure that you sell that service catalog internally. This was something I learned probably 3-4 years ago now, and with the customer, and it was actually the customer just happened to have this process in place where when they released something new, they had this communication process. And I can't stress enough how important, after seeing this, I feel that it is. Before releasing your service catalog, or before releasing something new to the service catalog, you want like a what's new email, or some sort of communication to get that excitement out to your users for how it can benefit them. You need to show them how it'll benefit them, and getting that communication piece in place before releasing it will really help drive out the usage when they're using it. So I like good, big, heavy hitters, quick things on what they can do, excuse me, or comparisons to your existing tool where you had something before that you're really improving on, that these users should be excited about. But that really helps internally sell the service catalog, and I think that piece is overlooked more often than not, and I think it is very, very important. So I would advise that everybody kind of goes that direction if possible. When you are looking at implementing the service catalog, I would concentrate, especially if you have to release the service catalog in pieces. Very rarely is somebody able to build out a service catalog or something as big as a service catalog and go big bang. Usually you're going to have pieces and kind of go through it in phases. And I would make sure that the first phase has some very big heavy hitters, or things that can be fulfilled quickly but are still very useful. I know a common one that's usually done the first phase is onboarding, which is not a quick one to implement, or something that can be fulfilled quickly, but it has huge advantages to the customer and to your internal staff. So I think that kind of weighs it out as well, where that is a good one to look at right away. But some of the other things that could be fulfilled, like a laptop upgrades or phone upgrades, things that can be quick that hit big groups of people, are good ones to really get out there at the start. You want to make sure that you cut off those other forms of work intake. We talked about those multiple sources. Once you have a service catalog in place, we want to make sure that we don't allow them to go those other directions. Sometimes you can't turn them off, but maybe remove the areas where they were requesting information. However you can do it, and sometimes something like this will take management support and a top-down driven process, but if you can cut off those other forms of work intake, you will see a better success rate with your current service catalog that you're implementing. We want to make sure that we have a feedback loop in place. What I mean by a feedback loop is the ability for users to be able to request other services, other catalog items, improvements to catalog items, any other feedback that they may have or provide for us. And we're going to want to track that feedback. We may not be able to get to it right away, but that's good for those phase 2, phase 3. As you get your users using the tool, and if you can get them excited about it, they're going to want to improve it. So the first thing they're going to want to do is come in with a new list of items of, oh, it does this, but now can we do this? And you're going to see the floodgates kind of open. So it's important to have that feedback loop in place and a way to document it so that you can store that for a later date. And that is a good thing. It's a good sign, because it's showing that they have that excitement and they can see where it helps them. This one, it's kind of funny. I've said this for years, and I almost have to stop saying it now because the tools have gotten so good that you almost can provide what they're looking for. But the first thing I would say is don't promise an Amazon-like shopping experience, because more often than not, you can't fulfill that type of excuse me. I'm still getting over a cold from like 2 months ago. More often than not, you can't provide that Amazon-like shopping experience, but we can provide something that's close or similar. And we want to make sure that it's following your, obviously your IT staff is slightly different than an Amazon shopping cart. So we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. We want to make sure that we're promising what we're going to be able to deliver and really get the people excited. I think nowadays the tools have gotten so good that we can get pretty darn close. So it may not be as important anymore, but the concept of not over-promising and under-delivering is probably still a good one to follow right here. And with that, Laura, I think we can get to any questions. And unless
excellent.
I do have some demo type stuff that I could show, but that's it for the slides.
Okay, why don't we take, we only have one question so far, so why don't we take that question and we'll do some demos. And during the demo, that'll give people a chance to think about the information and submit any other questions they'd like before we wrap up. One question
Perfect.
a few folks have asked, I'll just answer quickly, is can we get a recording? Yes, we are recording. It'll take a few days for us to convert and upload the video to our website, but I'd be happy to send that out to everyone who has attended and registered for the event today, so we will make that available. The first question I have for you, Greg, is how do you determine when to create tasks and when to create related requests?
I think that's a good question. If it's part of that parent request, I try to stick with tasks because it's easier for me to manage and keep track of that one request. And from an SLA perspective, I want task SLAs versus request SLAs. Where it gets a little bit fuzzy is when you have a request that has sub-requests as part of it. And what I mean by that is, for example, onboarding. We may, as part of onboarding, we're going to have a full workflow with requests that are actually requests later on in other places, like I need a new computer or an upgrade computer or a phone or whatever that is, where there are also other requests. And you could trigger those other requests. Personally, I recommend that the user goes through the process with onboarding with tasks and manages onboarding as tasks, but still has those other requests available, and those requests will trigger the same tasks. So the difference is the parent request is different with the same tasks. So I try more often than not to manage everything with tasks and one parent request instead of having related requests. I hope I answered the question. If not, please clarify again.
Okay, I don't see any follow-on at this point. I have another question that's come in. Is there a best practice template related to standard template, for example, offering a simple versus complex workflow?
Laura, can you say that one more time? I'm not sure that I followed it exactly.
Okay. Is there a best practice related to standard template? For example, offering a simple versus complex workflow.
I don't know if that person would like to be maybe unmuted and clarify that a little bit.
Okay.
If possible.
Sandra, please either use a raise your hand if you'd like to be unmuted and chat with Greg, or use the questions pane to type in yes, and we'll be happy to unmute you and let you visit directly with Greg. All right, so raise your hand. Sandra, I think we can hear
Don't be shy.
Oh, that is not a weakness with me.
Hello.
I'm trying to dual task, multitask here. So excellent webinar. It was right in great timing for me as I'm building standards by which we will build catalog items.
Okay.
And what I have discovered is a lot of the tasks that we have had in the past have been reassigned incorrectly to other people. So that means that a workflow is going to be extremely beneficial.
Good.
But it's going back to how much do I offer? Do I offer maybe a model that's very simple? Do I offer one that's maybe a medium complexity? And then maybe offer one that's a complex level that, involves so many people across the organization to get it accomplished. Rather than just whatever they want, we'll give it to them.
So you're talking about what to offer to your end users then. And it sounds like you're looking at the possibility of some end users maybe having the need for more complex and others maybe needing less. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, and from some perspective is if it's very simple, it could be turned around in like 2 days. But if you're going to ask me for something very complex, it could take a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. So I think what I would recommend, based on what I know here, and we could probably have a much more detailed discussion on this to talk about it more, but hearing what you're saying, I would probably say that the users that need something really simple, maybe you have permissions on your service catalog where they're only able to see those simple requests, and then you have other teams or groups that can see the service catalog with a much higher level of complexity, and by what I mean by that is services that they can request versus other services that the more simple ones. The other thing that I would look at from this is, as part of the email notification that they've requested something, you probably, the desire to have some sort of a timeline attached to that is usually pretty high. So as part of that email, you may want to say, this is going to take 2 or 3 days to deliver, and if this is a concern, please contact us, or something along those lines. You're going to, more often than not, people are going to see that as a generic email and just let it go. But if you see somebody where all of a sudden your request says, this is going to take 20 days to deliver, and that's not what they were expecting, then you can hopefully get that nipped right away. I don't like the idea of developing multiple service catalogs. Personally, I think that you should look at one and go more of a security type route and determining what they can see. Does that answer the question, or or not quite?
I want to create multiple catalogs at this point in time. Right now, I'm focused just on a product catalog and a software catalog.
Yeah, I think I would personally do. Yeah, I would personally do an all-in-one, and then look at security for what they have access to see and request, because then you don't have to worry about them requesting something they shouldn't. But the other option is definitely making sure that you have those SLAs tied to it so that they understand the length, the length of time. But I wouldn't worry about the complexity of the request, because you're going to have that built into the workflow. So they shouldn't, again, the end user shouldn't see that complexity. It's just going to be an SLA delivery. So if you tell them it's going to take 20 days.
Well, here, let me give you an example. One that I'm working on that was just, my boss just gave it to me and says, get this done. I want it done by the end of the week. You know, designed. And when I started looking at it, what I found was it wasn't as simple. It had to go through multiple departments for activities. That's where the workflow got really complex. And managing expectations that what we have and work effort-wise should be communicated. So this one was perceived as being, oh, that's a quickie, and he committed me to having it done by Friday, which is not reasonable. So it's like we need to categorize these kind of workflows or requests. Either they're simple, or they're complex, or there's something in between.
Yeah, and I would probably tie, I've seen people even use the same names that you just did, and then tie 2 to 3 days, 1 week, 2 to 3 weeks, and categorize them that way, so that people know once they've done the request, there's going to be a certain, if that's your SLA, maybe that's all it is. But yeah, you're going to need to put some sort of a time to those buckets.
You have any other good best practices for us?
There are a ton. So it's more at this point, I'd like to get to questions. If you guys have any topics specifically that you have questions on, bring them up. Otherwise, I do have some stuff that I can show inside a tool for how the layout or organization can go. I've got a couple of customer examples I can show, things like that too.
You can turn me off, Laura.
Thank you very much for the question, though.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for chiming in. Appreciate it. All right, we've got a couple other questions that have come in the meantime, so thank you for your questions. The next one I have for you, Greg, is, from your experience, how do task SLA compare to incident/request SLAs based on the parent ticket type in regards to durations?
Typically, request SLAs are longer than a parent incident or a regular incident SLA would be. You're looking at a fulfillment versus something that's broken and needs to be fixed. So right away, your request SLAs are typically longer. Tasks, though, in general, I've found task SLAs are usually pretty quick because hopefully that task is just one piece and not going out and building a huge infrastructure. And if that's the case, then maybe that huge infrastructure is part of a bigger request. So I typically would say the tasks I see pretty quick SLAs on, but the requests themselves, because you usually tie those to multiple tasks, maybe a little bit longer. And in general, they're all a little bit longer than, say, an incident with a break fix.
Okay. It looks like the other two are more of comments than questions for you. So since we have 15 minutes left, why don't we go ahead and move into some of the demo that you were mentioning. And in the meantime, if anyone else has questions, feel free to keep sending them in and we'll get to as many as we can.
Perfect. So again, because I'm a developer within Cherwell, what I'm going to show you is within Cherwell. But it should apply to any tool. So for a landing page, I actually dislike this landing page. I think there's too many links here on the bottom. I think it's I don't like how it isn't sized for widescreen, and I think there's just too many little options. So to me, I would look at trying to simplify this, and if I were to go look at for a specific client I've worked with, you can look at this landing page where I have those 4 options I was talking about. I have report an incident, submit a request, get help, and system alerts. Some of this other stuff, apparently I'm getting old. I'm not a big fan of all the big colors, but apparently that's the new thing I was told. So they wanted a lot of color on the front page, so there it is. I do like the transparency in the background, kind of getting rid of some of the white space. And I do like the personalization when you log on, showing the person their name, things like that. So some of those things are just kind of little points, but you can see when we had the question earlier about putting that report an incident versus a request, I don't hide it, but I hope that the customers understand the benefits of getting the request done and getting the request done properly, and more often than not, that seems to work for me. I do try to kind of hide the system alerts thing. Usually I don't want to advertise something's broken, and most customers kind of look at it that way too. But if somebody's trying to find something that may be broken or they're having trouble with something, they should have access to be able to see that. And this is how I would do that with a button on the main page. And this Get Help could be anything from going directly to the Cherwell help to going to another help site that you guys have for something internally you have to even just a frequently asked questions list. So when I'm talking about a landing page, this overall design is one that I really do like. Another one that I've done, and it's not necessarily that it's the prettiest, but I like how simple it is for another customer. And instead of having the buttons on the main page, we took the parent services and put them on the main page. So right there, they're able to go in and select the parent service. And then on the right, we put buttons that allowed them to get to some of the other things. And every customer is different. This eCarf thing to them is their onboarding. They wanted a parent button for that instead of going through the catalog. The report an incident obviously is the same as normal, that frequently asked question. And ticket status is like My Tickets. The other one that I had a menu button that actually had that, so you didn't have to go through on a button on the form. But some simple workflow processes where this really, I think, simplifies the interface for the users. And then once you get past that piece, I really like lists, not particularly this one, but this style, and I'll show you another one here. This is another good one, I thought. The problem I have with this one is I think that this is possibly too much for some. They open up this page and they see this huge list. And what I would recommend is getting more into multiple levels. So once you've selected the catalog, maybe you get into the smaller level of a list of all these parent blue objects. And then once you select that one, you see a small list of just the list underneath that. So I'd try to tier them a little bit more just to make it more of a walkthrough. I think people aren't so worried anymore. I hear all the time, oh, we want to keep track of the number of clicks or limit the number of clicks. When you're dealing with your end customer, it's more important, I think, to keep it simple. So regardless of the number of clicks, as long as it's intuitive and they know where to go, I think that's more important. So if I were to get within the tool here to out of box here, if I were to go to the service catalog, you see that other option. And then as you walk through the requests, each one of these has its own form that I'm then able to fill out with specific information for that request. So I'm going to just show request a projector, for example. And once I click that, now you can see the projector information. And I probably wouldn't, again, this is an out-of-box system, I wouldn't have the scroll bar. I'd make it more of a widescreen format if it was me. I think most people have widescreens at this point. But all of this information here is tied then to a request, and a task goes out to a team, and they're basically put in charge of having to get a projector into a room by a certain date or time for this presentation. So we can talk about, do I need a projector? Do I need a laptop to go with that? Do I need speakers? And does it need a projector or a video conference? Sorry, video conference tool. I don't know. I'm not sure of any presentation that doesn't need all those things. So go ahead and fill those out. Number of participants at the sites. You may be trying to figure out size of the room. There's so many different things that you can tie into this based on the information that you're filling out. So these questions can all be tweaked. Again, this is just an out-of-box demo example. And then you can add it to the cart, or I usually get rid of this add to cart and just submit it because I'm not a big fan of the multiple requests as a piece on the front end. To me, everything should be one request. And if I need multiple things, it should be tied to the workflow. But every customer is a little bit different. I've seen people do it differently. Again, there's no wrong way. It's what best fits the customer. So that's just a little bit to kind of show in the tool. Do we have any other questions off that, Laura?
We do. We have a few that rolled in. The first one is from someone using Sharewell. The question is this a Sharewell portal interface? What version was it done in, custom HTML, SaaS, or on-premise? Referring to the first Ascent landing page.
That is SaaS, and they are on 8.3.2 now. Nothing is custom, actually. So for the people who use Sharewell, the way I usually drive service catalogs is to do everything through dashboards, and I try to do custom instead of the, and by custom I mean with one-steps and links instead of following the action catalog. It's much more to manage, so it depends on the size of the customer whether or not they're capable of following through with that, because instead of being able to, with the action catalog, you're able to update everything with a single change. But with the custom one-step method, you have to be able to go in for every request being its own one-step. You'd have to edit those one-steps if you were making a global change. So there are times where it's more to manage, but it gives you a lot more flexibility, and especially with the layout, organization, and display to the end users, because you're just using the dashboard interface. So hopefully that answers that question. But it's nothing special about version or anything coming that anybody hasn't seen. It's just I like to use images. I'll have the customer get whether it's somebody that they have at their company that's good with Photoshop or download images. and I'll use images wherever possible for buttons or and what I mean by images, let's go look at that one more time because I don't want to make it sound like we're throwing a bunch of crazy images. All of these buttons here are images. Everything here. They did that in whether it was Photoshop or Paint or whatever instead of doing it within Cherwell with kind of the blocky look. And then when you get to look at this one, you know, these are images thrown in here. Everything else is just regular text, but then all of this is images. So every one of these are images, and then you can click. I used a hyperlink to go behind the image, so you can click any one of those images to be able to select instead of having to click just the text or anything like that. So just a few little tips and tricks.
Okay,
anything
great.
else, Laura?
We have a couple other. Yeah, we have a couple others. The next question is, would showing current system status prevent additional incidents from being entered?
It can. So that's why we do often do that. A common request is to have like a major outage or incident shown on the home page. I have one customer right now that's looking at doing that, and we're talking about building a custom business object, for which means nothing if you don't know Cherwell, but basically it's a record where they're going to manage their own records and label them exactly how they want, so they're displayed on the portal in the format they want. Because often if you just take an incident and say, I want to show this incident on the portal, well, if you don't have that description changed, it may not be in the terms that you want to display for everybody to see so that they know what they're seeing. So I have worked with customers on something like that. I think it's important to have a method to do it. So whether they go to system alerts versus major incidents or current outages, whatever you may want to call it, I think it's important to have that method and process in place. But unless it's something really, really major, I usually would avoid that scrolling bar across the top or whatever it may be that they're trying to do, and try and drive them more towards that button. So
Okay.
hopefully that answered the question. Otherwise, feel free to comment again.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. The next one I have is, what are some good tips on working with window size scaling? For example, resolution issues, smaller screens, and bigger screens, Cherwell anchoring for portals.
Yeah, I typically, especially for the one that you're seeing here, we picked a resolution and sized everything to that resolution, and that was their common resolution for what they handed out for everything, for most of their company. If somebody with a 28-inch monitor logs in, it's not going to look the same, but it'll still work. Worst case, somebody logs in with a 14-inch monitor and they have a few scroll bars. So most companies dedicate a size or a current setting. The problem is just getting them to say this is what we want to go with. But I would pick a resolution. Unfortunately, from a scaling perspective right now, that's the best we have. I know that they are redesigning the web portal, so that will, I think, get better here soon.
Okay. And the last question, there's one more. So now that we have two more questions, the first is, talk about best practices for making it possible for a user canceling, or better yet, changing a submitted request.
So canceling the request would be as simple as going into my open requests or tickets, and I would probably have a cancel feature there, and then as part of the cancel, I'd go through all the child tickets and cancel all the tasks and other items. The problem you're going to run into is if any of the tasks have been fulfilled already, and you're probably going to need to come up with a workflow for that piece. As for changing the request, excuse me, you can go two routes on that. You can either allow them a chance to submit a text update, and I would probably, as part of the workflow, start over on any approvals or tasks, because the problem is if they change the request after it's been approved, you have to re-go through that approval. More often than not, I would probably tell somebody to cancel the request and open a new one, because I think that's probably going to be the correct process to re-trigger the approvals. But each one of those items that you just asked can be dependent on the customer and their workflow. So there is no set, this is the way to do it. Laura, that's probably it for that one.
Okay, thanks. We have a question. What's the resolution we're seeing on the Ascent pages?
I believe it's 1280 by 720.
Okay.
Actually, no, it's not. I don't even know where it is on this anymore. I think it's this. I think it's 1920 by 1080.
Okay. That's the last question I have, so we'll leave the lines open for another 20 seconds or so. If anyone else has questions they'd like to ask of Greg before we wrap up today, please do so. And I'll scan again and
Great. Well, thank you, everybody.
all right, I don't see anything else coming in. Thank you so much for joining us again. It'll take a few days for us to convert and upload the presentation to our website, but it will be made available to you, so keep an eye out for that mid-next week. For anyone looking for slides, let us know. We'd be happy to share the deck with you, and I hope to see you on future webinars we run. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.